Let's go over today fear foods in eating disorders and eating disorder recovery. Now, most individuals battling an eating disorder will likely know what I mean when I say fear food, but for those of you who are unfamiliar with the term fear foods, what a fear food is a food or multiple foods or a food group that an individual has restricted out of fear that food is going to have an adverse reaction. And I don't mean an adverse reaction like they're going to throw it up. Sometimes that could be the case. I more mean an adverse reaction that the person is afraid that by eating this food, they're going to instantly gain weight. Or by eating this food, they may binge on this food. And so what happens is this food, multiple foods or food group, then gets entirely eliminated from their diet. And I don't mean that it gets eliminated in that this person would have it occasionally, but it's just not in their day-to-day. I mean entirely eliminated, meaning that this individual would never eat this food under any circumstances, no matter what whatsoever. Right? And oftentimes when it comes to eating disorders, this fear food, if presented to the individual, would cause a reaction such as crying or a panic attack, or maybe even just getting up and leaving the table because one fear food was on the plate. To give you an example, I had a client whose fear food was butter. And they had a dinner, and the dinner was, some protein, vegetables, carbs, whatever, but there was a pat of butter on the carb. Now, instead of this person just going ahead and eating the plate, or maybe even, not that I'm recommending this, but taking the pat of butter off, this person freaked out, saw the butter, left the table, and refused to eat dinner for the rest of the night. Now, of course, that's a pretty severe reaction to that, but in eating disorders, that's what that eating disorder brain takes over and tells that person that they have to do. However, it's really important that we work on reintroducing those fear foods. Oftentimes in eating disorders, the fear foods and list of fear foods tends to grow, or it may have started where the person has 2 or 3 fear foods throughout the trajectory of their eating disorder, and as that eating disorder voice gets louder, that list of fear foods can grow to 15, 20, 30. Sometimes it eliminates entire food groups, and of course, we don't want that. So, how do we work on reincorporating these fear foods into your day-to-day when you're working on recovering from that eating disorder? First and foremost, it can be really good to just write them out. Write them out in a list from slightly scary or slightly fearful to moderately fearful to very fearful or very scary, right? You can write them, just in a list where the top is the least scary and the bottom is the most scary. You can write them out in a graph where it's like least scary, moderately scary, super scary, however you want to do that, but write them out and categorize them in that way. The reason we want to do that is because then what we're going to work on is slowly working through that list. Now, ideally, you will be working with a dietitian and or a therapist while you're working through this list. But regardless, start by making the list, right? So then we will pick one of the slightly scary, the least of the list, to start adding in. And what's good to do is sort of plan that. So plan what day you're going to do it and what meal you're going to have that food, right? So let's say it is peanut butter. Peanut butter sometimes can be a scary food for individuals. Let's say that was on the slightly scary list, right? So that's the first food we're going to add. What you should do is say, okay, on Wednesday at lunchtime, I am going to have my meal, and then I'm also going to have an apple with peanut butter. The reason you want to do that and you want to pick a date and a time and what the food might be is because if you just say, oh yeah, I'll do it sometime this week, that eating disorder is really, really going to take over, and then it's going to push it out and it'll say, we'll just do that tomorrow, and then, tomorrow never comes. So pick a date, pick a meal, and pick what food that's going to be and what you're going to eat it with. Now, when that meal time actually comes, try to make the meal as comfortable as possible for yourself. Meaning, if you prefer to eat with your family or eat with a friend, do that when you're gonna have the fear food. If you're someone who actually prefers to eat alone and listen to music while you do, or play a crossword while you eat or something like that, then make that the situation when you add the fear food. We wanna make that meal as enjoyable as possible so that the fear food isn't adding on to an already stressful meal. Then what you're gonna do is, of course, work on eating that fear food. And hopefully you're successful with that right away. If you're not, and that meal didn't go so great, we try again the next day, or even try again the next week. If it is successful, try to do it again, all right? It doesn't have to be the same day. Maybe it could be 2 days later, but try to do that same fear food again a couple days later. What we're really trying to do is expose you more and more to this food, and that's going to make it less and less scary. And then, of course, what you do is start working through the list. You can start going through the rest of the slightly scary ones, into the moderate, into the super scary, but that's how we want to slowly work on reincorporating. It's a really challenging part of the eating disorder recovery process, but you can do it. And if you have a therapist and dietitian, I know that they'll support you in it, but definitely work on adding those foods back in to give yourself food freedom. Guys, thank you so much for being here. Please leave any questions that you might have in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe.